Pam Bondi had just announced a federal warrant for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but the chaos that followed was completely unexpected. The cameras were rolling as Bondi approached the podium. It was just after 9 a.m. in Sacramento, California, an unusual location for a DOJ press briefing. Reporters murmured, unsure of what was to come. Bondi didn't waste any time, her voice calm but assertive. A federal warrant has been issued against Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for obstructing federal immigration enforcement, she said, her gaze sweeping across the room, causing a deep silence. The flood of questions came immediately. Phones buzzed as the news spread across social media. AOC targeted by DOJ, breaking warrant issued, Pam Bondi targets AOC. In that instant, everything shifted. This wasn't a leak or political rumor. It was an official, sealed, and signed warrant. According to Bondi, it related to interference with legitimate federal operations, specifically a public campaign that allegedly encouraged undocumented immigrants to resist cooperating with ICE agents. She offered little more, only stating that the department had reviewed key evidence and that the situation was serious. She didn't take any questions before leaving the stage. Reporters shouted questions. Is this politically motivated? Where is AOC now? What does this mean for Congress? But Bondi didn't answer, leaving the room with her aides, lips tight. Outside, crowds had already gathered. Some AOC supporters waved signs, others had tears in their eyes, while a few yelled at counter-protesters, "They're trying to silence her." Inside the Capitol, the atmosphere grew tense. Staffers checked their phones repeatedly, watching social media. Members of Congress exchanged hurried whispers, unwilling to speak on the record, at least for now. No one saw this coming, not even AOC herself. At the time of the press conference, AOC was across the country, visiting a community center in Fresno. She had just finished speaking with local families when her assistant Jordan approached with a concerned expression. "You need to see this," she said, handing over her phone. AOC read the notification twice, her mouth opening slightly in disbelief, but no words came out. Jordan waited. "She really did it," AOC finally said. "She actually did it." AOC knew deep down this wasn't just about the law, it was personal, political. It was a warning shot aimed squarely at her. She glanced around the room, taking in the kids playing in the back, the older women folding pamphlets, and the mural on the wall behind them that read, "Know Your Rights." She had funded that mural. She had spent countless hours in that room, talking to people about what to do when ICE came knocking, how to ask for a warrant, how to stay silent, how to protect your family. Now, the very advice she had given might land her in federal court. She turned to Jordan. "Get the team on the line. I want everyone in the war room in 20 minutes. As she stepped outside, cameras were already waiting for her. One question echoed in the air. Is this the beginning of the end for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? While the country was still processing the news, the events that led up to it had started weeks earlier on a quiet evening with a laptop, a microphone, and a message AOC felt people needed to hear. It began as a modest outreach effort with no media, no headlines, just a digital flyer shared on Instagram and passed around in local immigrant groups. The flyer's title was simple: Know Your Rights in Case of ICE. AOC's team didn't expect any controversy. They had done similar community education before, but this time things would take a different turn. The event was held on Zoom, organized by her district office staff. The goal was to guide people on what to do if ICE agents showed up at their door. The message was clear: you have rights and you need to know them. There was no mention of breaking the law or hiding anyone. It was about the Constitution, particularly the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. But in today's world, nothing is ever that simple. The recording of the webinar didn't go viral right away. It sat online for a few days before a clip appeared on a conservative talk show. The host played a section where one of AOC's aides calmly explained that ICE agents could not enter a home without a judicial warrant. The host leaned forward, his voice thick with outrage. "This isn't education. This is obstruction, Chati." Clip spread quickly. Soon Tom Homan was making appearances on morning shows attacking AOC. She's teaching undocumented immigrants how to avoid ICE, he claimed. She's encouraging people to break the law under the guise of civil rights. Homan wasn't subtle. He called for the DOJ to investigate whether what AOC had done was even legal, claiming she was setting a dangerous precedent. Behind closed doors, DOJ officials started holding meetings, quiet ones, with no notes taken. It wasn't just about politics anymore. There were whispers of internal memos with phrases like borderline sedition. Meanwhile, AOC remained calm in public. When asked about the backlash, she didn't flinch. "Knowing your rights is not a crime," she said in a Bakersfield interview. "If teaching someone how to ask for a warrant is illegal, then we have bigger problems than immigration." But behind the scenes, her team felt the pressure. The mood had shifted. Reporters started asking tougher questions. Donors grew nervous. Some progressive allies privately advised her to dial things back for a while. AOC refused. A week later, a letter arrived, not quite official, but still a clear sign the situation was escalating. It came from the DOJ's Office of Legislative Affairs, requesting clarification on the webinar, including details about staff involvement and any external coordination. That was when AOC's team realized this was serious. She called an emergency strategy meeting at her Salinas office. Her chief of staff, Malik, read the letter aloud. Silence followed. "Do you think they're trying to scare us?" asked Jordan. Malik leaned forward. "I think they're preparing a case. This letter sounds like the start of one." AOC rubbed her forehead. "They're not just coming for me," she said. "They want to send a message. Don't help them, don't speak up." Her campaign manager, Louise, spoke up. "Then we fight back harder. Get every constitutional lawyer we can, get their names on a statement. We need to get ahead of this." But AOC didn't respond immediately. She stared out the window. Below, high school students walked by, laughing, backpacks slung over their shoulders. Life seemed so far removed from what she was facing. Her voice, though soft, was resolute. "If they want to scare me, it's not going to work. I've seen worse." But while her team was strategizing, the DOJ was working behind the scenes, drafting something far more dangerous than a letter, something that would escalate the situation into a national crisis. By the time AOC's letter reached the DOJ, the decision had already been made. Pam Bondi had participated in several closed-door meetings that week in Sacramento and Reno. Officially, they were about immigration strategy. Unofficially, they were about optics. How this would appear, who it would impact, and how far they could push before it seemed personal. Tom Homan's voice was the loudest in the room. "She knew what she was doing," he said firmly, pacing in the DOJ conference room. "You can't educate people on how to avoid law enforcement and call it constitutional guidance. That's interference." Others in the room weren't as certain, not because they doubted the claim but because of the fallout. Bondi knew the political storm this would ignite. She had seen the numbers, the social media data, the backlash already building. But she also saw an opportunity. The narrative was taking shape. AOC, the face of progressivism, had gone too far. She wasn't just making speeches anymore. She was interfering in active immigration operations. In some parts of government, that was crossing a line. Still, Bondi remained cautious. The DOJ couldn't appear partisan. That's why they worked through back channels first, gathering statements, digital records, webinar transcripts, and even past town hall speeches. They wanted a pattern, not an isolated incident. What they found was enough to draft a warrant. But it was AOC's follow-up letter sent directly to Bondi's office that made the situation explosive. It was brief, just 2 pages. In it, AOC asked a single direct question. Am I under federal investigation? No fluff, no legal jargon, just the question. Bondi didn't answer, at least not officially, but within 48 hours the warrant was drafted. It wasn't for an arrest, not yet, but it granted the DOJ the authority to subpoena AOC's communications regarding the webinar and any guidance her office had given to undocumented immigrants. It also gave them control over the narrative. Leak, whether intentional or not, followed. Days later, a memo found its way to a reporter at a small outlet in Reno. Within hours, the story spread. DOJ's AOC over ICE webinar. AOC's phone rang off the hook. Advocacy groups, lawyers, political allies, and even rivals all called. Some offered support, while others warned her to tread carefully. A few, mostly moderates, advised her to apologize publicly to de-escalate things. She refused. "This isn't about me," she told her team. "They want to see if they can silence people like me. If I back down, they'll come for someone else next. Probably someone without the platform I have." Louise agreed. "But now they're playing dirty," he said. "This isn't just Twitter drama, this is federal muscle." Everyone could feel it. What had begun as a political skirmish was now a legal battle with real consequences and serious risks. To stay ahead, AOC's team brought in legal counsel, not just campaign lawyers but constitutional experts, civil rights lawyers, and people who had faced the DOJ before. They held nightly briefings in a rented conference room in a Fresno hotel. Was during one of those briefings that Malik said something no one wanted to hear. "If they're pulling records," he said, flipping through an email chain from months ago, "they might go after staff, interns, volunteers." "This is about more than the warrant," he added. "It's about intimidation." The tension was palpable as AOC's team prepared for their next move. In many ways, this moment felt like a culmination of everything they had worked for and against. But it wasn't just about the warrant or the legal battle anymore. It was about showing people that this fight wasn't just her own, it was theirs. The next day, AOC called for an all-staff meeting including the volunteers who had worked on her campaigns from the very beginning. Some were in Washington, others in her district in New York, but they were all there, either in person or on a Zoom call. AOC stood in front of them, her usual fiery presence subdued but her eyes burned with resolve. "I know this isn't easy," she began, her voice steady but with a weight behind it. "But we're not backing down. This is about more than just me. This is about whether or not we let them silence the people who need us the most." She paused, looking at the faces in the room. Familiar faces, some of which had been with her since the beginning. "They want to scare us, they want to break us, but we can't let them. If we do, we're giving up everything we've fought for." Malik spoke up from the back of the room. "We need to go on the offensive, not just on social media, but with every single person we can talk to. We need to make this personal. This isn't just about policies, it's about who we are as a country." AOC nodded, then turned her gaze to Louise. "What do we have in terms of legal backup?" Louise, ever the strategist, replied, "We have a solid team, constitutional lawyers, civil rights advocates, people who understand the law and aren't afraid to challenge it when it's misused. They've already started drafting a statement. We need to stay ahead of the narrative, especially when it comes to what happens next." The team exchanged looks, each of them processing the gravity of the situation in their own way. Some had seen political fights before, but this was different. The intensity was unlike anything they had faced in the past. AOC's eyes flicked to the laptop in front of her, showing a live feed of the protesters outside her district office, the same people who had always stood by her, and now they were waiting for her to lead them through this new battle. "We can't just fight for immigrants, for civil rights," AOC said, her tone sharper now. "We fight for everyone who's afraid that they're next. We fight for the students, the teachers, the families. We fight for the truth." Jordan, standing near the door, stepped forward, her voice breaking the tension. "I know I've been scared. We all have. But we can't let them win. We need to show them that they can't scare us into submission. I'm in this with you all the way." Her words felt like a quiet, necessary spark, an acknowledgement that the stakes weren't just legal or political anymore. They were personal. AOC took a deep breath, trying to shake off the exhaustion that had been weighing on her for weeks. "This is a fight for the soul of this country," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "And we're going to win." As the meeting came to an end, AOC's team dispersed to their next tasks, some drafting statements, others preparing for media appearances. But for AOC, it wasn't over yet. There was one last thing she had to do. She stepped outside into the crisp morning air, taking a deep breath. In the distance, the Capitol dome rose above the trees. She thought back to that first night she ran for Congress, to the rallies, the faces of the people who had taken a chance on her. She wasn't going to let this moment be the end of her story, or anyone else's. With her phone in hand, she hit record. She didn't need a script, didn't need to overthink it. This was the message she needed to send. AOC looked directly into the camera. "This is bigger than me." "It's bigger than any one of us," she began. "This fight is about the kind of country we want to be. Do we want to live in a place where people are punished for knowing their rights? Or do we want to build a place where people can stand up for what's right no matter how hard it gets?" She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle. The screen was filled with her determined face, and behind her, the Capitol stood silent and unyielding. "We're not going anywhere. We're just getting started." She hit stop, then posted it, knowing full well the storm it would create. But she wasn't afraid, because at the end of the day, this was what she had always fought for. Not just power, but the ability to speak the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might make those in power. The video went viral. Within hours, the comments flooded in again, thousands of them from supporters, from critics, from people who hadn't thought about it until now. The firestorm had only just begun, but AOC knew one thing for certain: she wasn't backing down. The days following AOC's court appearance were a whirlwind. The case wasn't over, but the narrative had already shifted. No longer was it just a political attack or a case about immigration. It was about the very heart of democracy. The story was no longer solely about her. It had become a story about all of them. The people standing up, the voices pushing back, and the system that could either uphold justice or be used to crush it. AOC's phone rang constantly, her inbox, flooded with messages, and news outlets continued to dissect every part of the trial. But amidst the chaos, she found moments of clarity. There were more messages like the one from the young girl, words of thanks, support, and solidarity that reinforced why she was doing this in the first place. The pressure was immense, but so were the voices rising in unison with hers. In the weeks that followed, the media frenzy didn't let up, but the public's reaction began to grow more nuanced. A quiet shift took place. More people began to question whether the fight against AOC was truly about the law, or if it was an attempt to silence a movement that dared to push against the status quo. Then came the decision from the court. It was a Friday afternoon when the ruling came down. The judge had taken his time, and when he finally issued his verdict, it wasn't a sweeping victory for AOC, but it wasn't a defeat either. The court ruled that there was no substantial evidence to show that AOC's actions were criminal, but it also acknowledged the political nature of the case. The message was clear. What AOC had done might be politically inconvenient for some, but it wasn't illegal. It wasn't obstruction. It was a legal, albeit controversial, act of education. AOC stood in front of the cameras as the news spread, the weight of the ruling heavy, but not crushing. There were still obstacles to overcome, still fights to be had. But she knew that this was just one battle in a much larger war. And in this battle, she had proven something crucial: that standing up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you, wasn't just possible, it was necessary. As she walked away from the podium, Malik caught up with her. "So what now?" She smiled, tired, but resolute. "Now we keep going. We don't stop. We keep fighting for the people who can't speak, for themselves, for the ones who feel like their voices don't matter. This isn't over, it's just beginning." And she was right. Because in that moment, standing there amid the flashing cameras, the loud voices, and the swirling chaos, AOC knew that this moment, this trial, had already changed something. The people who had been watching had seen the truth behind the headlines. They had seen that power doesn't always win when it's challenged by truth. And for that, no matter the outcome of the trial, she had already won something far more important: the hearts and minds of people who knew they, too, had the right to question, to demand, and to speak up. The fight would continue. But as long as there were voices willing to ask questions, to demand accountability, and to challenge injustice, there was hope. And with that hope, AOC knew that the light, the one that she had been fighting to protect, wasn't going out anytime soon.